Let's talk a bit more about the government reshuffle. With me now, let's bring in French politics professor Jim Shields in Bristol. Jim, thanks for taking the time to speak to us. As always, such a pleasure. What for you are the biggest challenges for President Macron's new government now?
Well, what strikes, first of all, in this reshuffle is the careful balancing of political tendencies. We have former socialists, former members of the Republicans and the centre-right, centrist Modem figures. So the first thing to say is that the alchemy of the government as a coalition of political sensibilities of left, right and centre is maintained. But behind that picture, there's another picture that's less encouraging for Macron. All of those appointed in this reshuffle were already declared Macron sympathisers. And in the formation of the new government, overtures were reportedly made to others on the left and right who declined. So it seems that the pulling power of Macronism might have peaked, and that both left and right have now solidified in opposition. That brings us straight to the heart of your question. This is a government that intends to go on to proceed with exactly the same policy agenda. It's going to be the same business-friendly, tax-cutting approach as we've previously seen under Macron for the past 18 months. This is part of the problem, because it's also a government, the outgoing and no doubt the incoming, that is increasingly challenged on that policy agenda. And by the way, it's heading into some big reforms of unemployment benefits, of pensions. That's the direction we're heading in. And I think it's going to be a stormy ride for the government.
Let's talk a bit more about why this reshuffle happened now. I know Macron's hand was forced a bit, if you like, by the resignation of his former Interior Minister, Gérard Collomb, but that's not the only reason.
It's the main reason. It's the main reason. This is a reshuffle that has put the president on the back foot. It has been a very difficult process for Macron to see this through and put together the new government. He would have had a reshuffle sooner or later, but presidents usually choose the moment with their prime minister when they replace ministers and which ministers to replace. This has been very different. Gérard Collomb, the outgoing interior minister, simply walked away and thereby provoked a mini crisis within the government, temporarily covered by the prime minister. I've never seen this before. I don't remember seeing this before. So Macron had to patch this up and patch it up quickly. On the other hand, he has sent out a message by taking 2 weeks, and the message is this: he is still master of the ship of state, and he chose to take his time in this reshuffle rather than to, let's say, act in haste and repent at leisure.
Macron still has 3.5 years in office. He still has a majority in parliament, despite what you were saying earlier about perhaps not finding enough from the left and the right. Doesn't he still have enough weight here in France to push through what he wants to push through?
Well, he should have. The opposition on both left and right remains weak. And in that sense, Macron has a very, let's say, propitious situation to exploit. On the other hand, he's also answerable primarily to the French public, to French citizenry. And there, Macron has been sliding in the opinion polls. The impression has been gathering pace of a president who is quite simply out of touch with the French. And this was not helped by Gérard Collomb's parting remarks that this was a regime, Macron's, which lacked humility, and where only a few chosen courtiers could dare to speak to the president. So Macron faces this big problem of image before he can even move to the next stage of implementing his reform agenda. He has to do something about the way he is communicating and his government is communicating with the French.
It's true. He has been also accused of being just plain out of touch. You're talking about him changing his image, his way of communicating. What could he say to the French people to make things better at this point?
Well, this is very difficult. The problem for French presidents is that once a label sticks, it tends to stick. If we look back at Chirac, he was labelled a lazy occupant of the Elysee chair. Hollande was a weak, indecisive president. Sarkozy was the bling president. These three never shook off that label. Macron's problem is that he was very early labelled a president of the rich. And many of his reforms have borne that out. The tax breaks and other policies that he has already implemented, as well as some that are in the pipeline. So he has the problem of shifting a label that has already been solidifying around him. It's very, very difficult. Once this happens to a president, it's difficult to shed.
Jim, thank you for that. Jim Shields there speaking to us from Bristol.